Welcome back to our token-based authentication course. In this lesson, we are going to implement user registration. We're going to create a component to register our users and then plug that into Vuex to handle some of our tasks. Let's get started. In the previous lesson, in our server.js file, our dashboard endpoint was automatically sending us back our event data. But now it's going to verify that we have a token before it sends back that private data. So let's understand how the server is going to handle requests made from our Vue app. So when we route to dashboard in our app, that's going to make an API call out to the dashboard endpoint on our server. Our server will verify that we have the proper permission, or in other words, the token, to access the private data. But if we don't, we'll get a 401 message back. However, if we do have that token, which we send along with that request, the server will verify that we have the proper permissions and send back our private data. So if we actually take a look at the server.js file, this is what the dashboard route currently looks like. As you can see, it is verifying that we have the token. If we don't, we'll send back a 401 message. Otherwise, it will respond with those private events. So if we check out the app as it currently is, and we click on the dashboard, we see that since we are not sending along a JWT token, we're getting that 401 message back, like we expected. So we need to implement some code so that we can receive a token from the server when we register a user, and then take that token and send it along with requests to that dashboard endpoint. So our steps for this lesson look like this. We're going to create a register user component. This will accept a user's credentials, their name, email, and password. Then we'll head over into the Vuex store file to do a few things. First, we'll take the credentials that the user just gave us in our register user component and send them to the server over to the register endpoint. The server then takes those credentials, adds our user to our mock database, and sends us back a response of user data, which includes a JWT token that it just created for us. Then within Vuex, we will store that user data in our state, as well as in local storage. And finally, we need to add that token we just got to our Axios header so that when we make calls out for protected data to the locked dashboard route, we're sending along a copy of that token. Now let's start creating the register user component. We'll head into our views directory and create a register user.vue file. Then I'll use a snippet to scaffold out a component. And we need some data here, and we know that we need a name, email, and password. Now heading up into the template, I'm going to paste in some code. You can get this below the video. And you'll see now we have a form with 3 inputs with a label, one for our name, email, and password, each of which are v-modeled to our data. And below, notice we have a register button, which means up at the top here, on the form element, we need to add @submit.prevent equals register. That is the name of a method we're going to write below. This register method is going to dispatch a Vuex action called register, which we haven't written yet, but we're about to. When it dispatches it, it's going to pass along an object of that user data, of the name, email, and password. So now we're ready to head into the store file and write that action. First, we'll import Axios, since this action will make an API call. Like I said, the action will be named register. It's going to take in commit along with the credentials that we sent in from the register user component when we dispatch this action. It's going to return an Axios post request to our server at localhost 3000, specifically to the register endpoint. We're going to send along the credentials that we passed into this action. Then, when the server returns a response, we're going to take the data from the response. And for now, we'll just console log it so we understand what it's giving us back. We're almost ready to check this out in the browser to make sure it works, but first we need the ability to actually access our register user component, which means we'll need to add that as a route in our router.js file. So we'll do that quickly now. We'll import the component from our views directory. And add it to our routes array. Great. Now let's check this out in the browser. If we head to our register route and register a user, when we hit the register button, we're seeing our user data in our console log, which the server sent back to us, including the email, name, and token. Awesome. Now that we're successfully getting that response back from our server, we can start putting it where it needs to be within our application. So we'll switch this console log out with a commit. It'll commit the set user data mutation, which we are about to write. We will pass in that response data. That mutation will set the data in our state, so we'll add a user property to our state. And now we can write the mutation itself. Our set user data mutation will take in the state along with the user data. We will set the state of our user equal to the user data. We will also store the user data in our local storage. We will run the json.stringify method on it because local storage expects a string, not an object. And finally, we need to set the header of our Axios instance with that token from the user data. So we'll say axios.defaults.headers.common, and then set the authorization to type of bearer, and then use string interpolation to add in the token. This is a bit verbose, but what you need to understand is we're just adding the token into the header so that when we make API calls, we have that token that the server can verify. Now, before checking that this all works, we have one final step to add. When a user creates an account and hits that register button, we want to actually redirect them to the dashboard. So let's make that happen. We'll head back into our register user component, and we'll add a then here. So once a user is registered, we will use the router to push them or redirect them to the dashboard route. Now let's head into the browser and make sure all of this code is working. We'll create a new user. And when we hit register, we are redirected to the dashboard, and we see these private events, so it looks like it was working. If we pop open the Network tab, we can see that indeed the register call was made. And below that, the dashboard call is made. And if we inspect this, we can indeed see this authorization header, which is of type bearer and includes that JWT token. So that does it for our lesson on user registration. In the next lesson, we'll look at logging in users who already registered with our application. See you there. All right, so let me rehearse while this is happening. So
you must feel the force around you. Its energy surrounds us and binds us.
Right. Okay.